Hey guys, Brian here. Welcome back to the shop. I had to do a bunch of shuffling up in the other shop, but I was finally able to get this 8.3 Cummins dug out of storage up there. This is a core motor I bought several years back. Had different plans for it that didn't work out, but new plans for it are to put it in the Hyster forklift. I need to get that thing to where I can run it and use it and have it reliable. And I choose an 8.3 because it has about 100 foot-pounds more torque clutch engagement than a 5.9 Cummins. So you're looking at about 500 foot, well actually, no, it's more than that. This is like 400 foot-pounds, and I think a regular 5.9 is like 300 foot-pounds clutch engagement torque. So 25% or more is a big gain, and since forklift predominantly operates at idle speeds, at least for me anyway, that'll be a big advantage. I'll have a lot of power without having to rev the engine up, so clutch will last longer, it'll be more maneuverable. When you pull the levers back for the hydraulics, it won't choke the engine out. That's the hope anyway. So it'll be a big upgrade anyway. I'm not hoping for more than 250 horse out of this. It'll be more than enough for moving that forklift around, and 250 out of a 8.3 is nothing spectacular special. My goal with this is to have a setup that's easy to start and fuel efficient and reliable. So that's what I'm aiming on building. But before I can start building, I gotta tear this all apart and gotta inspect and make sure I got usable components here for the block and the connecting rods and the crankshaft. I got an engine overhaul kit a while back. For those of you that are subscribed to my buddy Fred Newman's channel, the fellow that hauls a lot of machinery for the various machinists that are on YouTube. He hauled Adam Shaper, and he took stuff out to Jason at Fireball Tools. I think he took him his shaper as well. And he brought a piece back for me from out Washington State way. And in the process, I hooked him up with an overhaul kit for the haul truck that he's building that is also 8.3 Cummins powered. So got a deal on the two kits. So one of them's going in the forklift and one of them's going in his truck. So if you want to follow that along on his channel for Fred Newman, you can do that as well. But there's nothing left to do except to do it. So I know I gotta have an oil cooler base because this one, the filter mounts broke off of it. I may have one, I'm not sure. If not, I'm sure I can source one somewhere. But let me get you over here and I'll show you what I hope is the reason why this engine was relegated to core status and there's not something more major wrong with it. I pulled the head and stuff off of it a long time ago, and the head looks like brand new. I think actually it was replaced sometime recently prior to this thing having its failure. Could have been something they did in the process of putting that head on. They could have mixed up components and caused an issue, but anyway, it looks like it got a torched piston. So, at least I should say scuffed piston. This back cylinder there, you can see scuffing all over the walls. It's pretty common on these Cummins. The 5.9s do that too. The back hole runs the hottest, and it's usually the one that gets torched first. That one there looks okay. I don't know, but these two, they're up in the bores, can't really see them. Had some corrosion going on there, but this thing's been sitting before even I got it. So looks like there was some scuffing in this cylinder as well. And number one looks okay. So other than that, had no blown head gaskets. Head gasket looks real good on here. Again, like I said, I don't know that it had been together for very long before they decided to take it apart. I think this is out of a Case International Combine. I'm guessing that they had problems with it and thought the head would fix it, and then found out, nope, it ain't gonna fix it. So I wound up pulling the motor instead. The vacuum pump will do away with that. That's an automotive application. Does fit in there, but found most of the parts to make this work. So over there where the chickens are invading, there's a flywheel housing to go on the back here. So I'll get you set up and you can watch me tear this down. We'll do it in fast forward so it don't take forever. Oil coolers on these engines tend to have several lengths of bolts, so I like to try and keep them all in the holes if possible. Oh, looks like these are all the same. Had some mice up in the cooling jacket. Well, there's a busted oil pump, so that's not a good sign. Still turns though. So have to see when you get it tore down. That's why you get your cores cheap, because they're junk. So And see by the amount of steel in the oil pan, no doubt gonna find some issues in here. Although fortunately, the mains don't look like they got hot. Maybe that one, we'll have to see. But you can see they left the, they loosened these two rods up, left the nuts off of them so they could get this thing to pass as a core. It spin 360. So spun okay when I bought it, and that's why, because somebody had already done been into it and rigged it to make it pass, even though it's really junk. So probably gonna have to grind a crank, turn a crank, do something here. But I have to get this the rest of the way apart, and then I'll decide what I'm gonna do with it. So I'll get this bottom end off here and bring you back. The battery's about dead on this camera. Okay, so to get these liners out, this is a wet sleeve motor. So it's got O-rings that seal it up. It's a little different from a lot of them. These are lower press fit liners as opposed to uppers. So the counter bores are in the bottom of the block. Well, they're actually mid-stop. They're in the middle of the block instead of in the top. They don't run coolant all the way around these liners all the way down. And these motors, there's about 2 or 3 inches. It's oil cooled on the bottom as opposed to coolant cooled or solid like it is in, say, a Deere block or something. These Cummins blocks are not nearly as heavy in the bottom end as a Deere block, but that's usually not the problem. The problem is on these typically is breaking rod bolts and throwing rods out the side of the block. So I may change to L rod since I got one messed up anyway. I'll take a look at that here in a minute, but for now let's knock this last liner out here. So to do it, I'm just using one of my hold down straps. It's the right width, and I lay it up in there against the liner. Make sure I'm not against the block anywhere. Put my 2x4 in there and hold it, and hit it. Got all the liners knocked loose. So that's why somebody mid-stop. This is all that's got coolant on it in these engines. Deere liner comes down here. I got one here. This is a more conventional cylinder liner for a wet sleeve engine. They run coolant all the way through this area, so only this part's in the block. Whereas this is going in the block right here, and then this is oil cooled down at the bottom. But these are a thicker liner, a lot thicker than these because of the heat transfer differential. These got to have a lot of coolant to back them up or they would distort too bad. Whereas these don't need nearly so much coolant to keep distortion down. And apparently Cummins thinks because of this taller length here, the expansion when this is under load, of course, would be greater. So the head gasket sealing capability is supposed to be superior with this versus this style, because you've only got this little bitty amount here that's expanding, contracting. All this is floating, so it can go down into the block as it heats up or retract as it cools down, and there's no support down here, whereas this one's held midway, so it's got a lot more support on the cylinder part. They don't vibrate around. These get, if you don't run good coolant, they blow holes all up in the bottoms of them or up and down the sides. You'll just eat them up with cavitation, because these things are vibrating around. You get little bubbles forming on them. Especially if you're running real high horsepower where it really vibrates a lot, then it's to be super critical to be running good coolant so that you don't have problems. Otherwise it'll eat holes all the way through the liners and start dumping antifreeze in. This setup's not nearly as prone to that, so they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. Yeah, I'd say that liner weighs double what that deer liner does, but the block weighs half as much. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Oh well, let's review the damage, I guess. So, all the rods look okay, except for that number 6 there. That was the one that was scalded real bad. And it still moves free. It's not dorked up on the pin, but it has gotten hot enough to change the end color. So, I don't know if I'd reuse that or not. Besides, I looked everywhere for the 2 nuts and forgot the fact that when I tore this apart, they had 2 nuts missing because they left the rod caps loose so they could turn the engine over to qualify it for a core and fool me into thinking that it was a decent engine or something rebuildable without a lot of work. So the block looks okay. I think it'll clean up and be all right. Fortunately, I don't see any damage on it anywhere. All the holes look good, and counterboards look good. No cracks or damage. It's pretty clean. When I put cam bearings in it, they look fine. I think this engine was rebuilt shortly before its catastrophic failure. I don't know if they left a bolt out or if a killer dowel pin struck. There's supposed to be a dowel pin in this hole, and it's not there, like this one here. So I'm thinking maybe that dowel pin came out, which is a 5.9 common problem. Cummins apparently doesn't know how to get their press fit on their dowels correct. They get them too loose, and then they vibrate and fall out the timing cover, come down, fall through the gears and destroy everything, which is what happened here. Something went between the gears to bust that oil pump housing. So then it run out of oil, and that was the end of the line. One good thing about the oil pump breaking is it means it didn't circulate any of the metal when it was destroying itself. So the oil cooler should be fine. Normally I would have to replace it because it would have metal all in it, but since it had no oil pressure and there was no oil flow, there wouldn't be any oil going into the oil cooler. So that's why probably when I pulled it apart, I didn't see any damage there. Everything looked good until I got into the inside, and then it doesn't look so good. The main bearings look real good. I don't see any damage at all on them, but the rods were pretty toasty. The tappets all look good, so I numbered them so I can put them back in their correct orders. I'm gonna get mixed up. Mains all felt good in the block. Block didn't overheat, so no distortion there. And everything is pretty clean. There's the tops of the rod bearings. So you can see they were all pretty much giving up at the same time. So that's fortunate because it meant that it just locked the engine down and seized it and kept it from running before it spun any of them. So none of them were spun, so I don't think that part's trashed. Camshaft looks good. There's no unusual wear or anything on it. So that's totally reusable. No damage visible on the cam gear, no teeth gone. It's up on the side. So the crank gear probably did eat that dowel maybe. Or it could have gone between the two oil pump gears and not got the crank. Crank gear looks fine. There's the crank gear. So mains look good. See the rod's starting to get a little bit of transfer, but you can't feel it. So, and it mics on the high end of size, so I think it'll polish out and be fine. The worst one is this number 5 rod. Let's see, it was rubbing pretty hard. You can feel it on that one, just right in the center where the bearing's open. So, but it mics oversized right there, so I think it's bearing transfer onto the crank. So when I polish it, I still think it'll be fine. It's gonna come down to correct size. But otherwise, they all mic within 0.5 thousandths of each other. And I said they're at the high end of spec. They could come down 1 thousandth on each one and still be within spec for normal clearance. And the pulling tractor engines a lot of times will go 3 thousandths extra, but you do sometimes have some oil pressure issues if you get that far out, unless you got a real good oil pump and run it cold all the time. I'd like to have good oil pressure because this thing be idling, not running 5,000 RPM. So I don't want to get the clearances too far, so I just have to see how it cleans up, and if it doesn't, I just have to get another crank. That'll be cheaper than getting this one reworked. So plenty of these out in the world. But otherwise, looks good. There's no bend in it. I measured here off my surface plate using my height gauge, and or I guess it's a height gauge, and found nothing out of spec there. It's not bent, not twisted, so should be good to go as far as that goes. Just need to get it cleaned up and check it out, make sure it's 100%. So the teardown phase is done. It's all cleanup and inspection now. So let me tear down this little engine as we start the Hyster forklift resurrection, so I can get it to where I can use it. I think this will be a sweet setup in it. It should be a big time improvement over the old Hercules. You'll have way more torque and better performance all around. And it'll be a diesel, so no spark plugs to mess with, and one wire to start it and one wire to kill it. Really don't even need that if you could just put it on a cable, but it should just be good like it is. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, I'll catch y'all later.